Bitcoin is printing an absolutely disastrous head and shoulders on the 4-hour chart, but the question is it going to fulfill this pattern? More importantly, we're going to dive into what I think of as the elephant in the room. Today, we're going to be talking about Grayscale and their effect on Bitcoin price, and it's all going to lead to me predicting when I believe the next big Bitcoin pump is going to be. So if you guys are excited for this, go ahead and destroy that like button, because we're going to go deep and you're going to learn a lot about our current Bitcoin ecosystem. We're going to do some chart analysis. We're going to even talk about a few altcoins, but we're going to explain to you what I'm looking forward to in the next few days. You're definitely going to want to watch this episode all the way through. And if you guys want to stay on the bleeding edge of blockchain and crypto, then you're definitely going to want to subscribe and put that bell notification on, because as soon as I feel ready, I'm going to unleash upon you a barrage of new opportunities in the space, things that I've been watching and investing in for some time now. But of course, timing isn't everything in crypto. It's the only thing. So you're definitely going to want to subscribe and put that bell notification on, set to all, so that you can be aware exactly when I put out this content. With that said, let's dive in. So as you can see here, there was a little bit of bullish divergence happening here as we ended up getting a breakdown of Bitcoin, and it did get confirmed a little bit on the 4-hour chart. However, what we do want to look at that is really, really important here is the head and shoulders that almost anyone and their grandma can identify here. You can see I'm not a TA expert here, but you can see here no matter where you draw this neckline, you know what? This isn't looking good because you have two clear shoulders ahead. And if this breaks down, that would mean that this would break down somewhere to the next big viable levels of support. Now, there is one saving grace here because there's a theory in general that we always do something called filling the CME gap. Now, for those of you guys who are new around here, CME is a futures exchange based in Chicago, and it trades through normal business hours, Monday through Friday, and it actually closes on the weekend. And so you can see here, if you look at the bottom, you see that this one trading red candle here is on the 8th of January, and then this is the 11th. Obviously, in crypto land, we trade 24/7, so occasionally there's this what they call gap. And this gap right here is what they call the CME gap, and it represents an area that essentially there was institutional order flow that missed. And so there's kind of like a conspiracy theory that we always go to fill the gap, right? And that you always want to go up. There's like this gravity towards the gap because there's these institutional big players that didn't get to essentially continue their trading experience from the gap. Now, it doesn't always get filled like this, and it's more of a theory than a reality. But if we do end up heading back up towards that gap up here, that gap comes in here at about $38,000. And so if we do end up heading back up there, that would actually mean that we're probably not going to fulfill this head and shoulders pattern. If we do end up breaking down, though, that would mean that we'll probably get price action headed down to the $27,000 range. Again, the real area of support here is like the $23,000, $24,000 range. And I'll tell you why that's actually pretty significant. Because today we're going to be talking about something that I think is one of the most important aspects of Bitcoin and crypto land. But more importantly, this is also why I've been holding off on giving you my altcoin list, because the reality is that when I call altcoins, I like for them to go up in value. And if it's potentially at a point right now where the market will collapse, at least temporarily, remember, again, that would mean that probably altcoins would take a temporary hiccup. Let's just first talk about Bitcoin and then we'll get to the alts. So the big question is, how much Bitcoin does Grayscale have? And recently it was estimated that they have about 2.69 of Bitcoin's outstanding supply. However, Chainalysis estimates that about 3.7 million BTC have been lost and will forever be out of circulation, which means that they own upwards of 3.5% or so of Bitcoin, and which is now worth over $10 billion. Now, that's all great and good and all, but the reality is that they don't actually sell Bitcoin. So how does this work, and why is this an important thing to be paying attention to, regardless of the fact that Grayscale actually doesn't buy and sell Bitcoin like that? Well, let's take a look at what's going on under the hood and see if we can understand how this might be working. So first of all, let's explain what GBTC is, how it works, and let's try to understand how the beginning of 2021 has potentially not had as much institutional support as the end of 2020. We're going to walk you through what Grayscale is and how it works, and then we're going to talk about how they make money and how essentially they keep reeling investors in, and then we're going to talk about what might have just gone on in the beginning of 2021, and finally, I'm going to explain to you the opportunity that we have to take advantage of potentially in the next couple of weeks as this unfolds. So first of all, Grayscale owns over 500,000 Bitcoin, 536,000 as of the end of December. What they do is essentially they hoard Bitcoin and they hoard USD, which is then used to purchase Bitcoin. Everything flows in and nothing comes out. What they do have, though, is what's called shares of their stock, which is GBTC, Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And essentially that then trades on the markets. But here's how they sell GBTC, because there's two ways to acquire it. The first way is you just get it on the stock market, go buy GBTC. The second way is that they actually have accredited investors that can invest a lot of money at a time. Accredited investors typically have a lot more wealth. That's what makes them accredited, right? That's why they can take these risks. So essentially, accredited investors give BTC or UST to Grayscale, and essentially 0.001 BTC equals 1 share of Grayscale, or GBTC. But it's at the exact value of Bitcoin right then and there, because I could actually just take a Bitcoin and invest it in GBTC and get that amount of shares right now if I'm accredited. But this is the big catch. The catch is that there's a lockup period, that they cannot sell the shares of GBTC on the market for 6 months. So what this essentially creates is like a vesting period where I put in my 1 Bitcoin and I get 1,000 shares of GBTC, but I can't sell them yet. And this is where the retail investor comes in. You know, the people the institutions use to make their money off of. See, historically, almost for the entirety of GBTC's life, especially during a bull run, we have what's called the GBTC Premium, or the Grayscale Premium as it's called. And you see here that GBTC recently closed at $28.25. I think it's higher now, obviously, because Bitcoin's higher. But the Brave New Liquid Coin Index closed at 22,830. Now, the translation is that each GBTC share is just under 1/1000th of a Bitcoin, because there's a little fee there, meaning that the fair value for GBTC is $21.71, not $28.25, which is a 30% premium. This is a 30% premium just because this is a retail buyer, not a wealthy individual that could afford to go through the accredited institutional investor route. So now that you understand that essentially with Grayscale, there's two prices. There's what the accredited investors pay when they lock up their funds, which is essentially a Bitcoin divided by a little bit more than 1,000. However, if you're looking at the retail cost, well, those shares are worth actually a lot more. So the big deal here is this. When there is a lockup period where they take in new funds that are going to be locked up for a while, if there's a big premium at the time of lockup, meaning there's a big discrepancy between the retail price and the accredited investor price, then essentially these accredited investors are looking at easy 30 or 60% returns based on the 30% returns over the first lockup period. Or if there's a 2 lockup periods during a year, they're looking at 60% annualized returns. By getting 2 times, they can invest and make a 30% return each and every year. So why would they not do this? So understanding that they can buy Bitcoin, lock it up, sell and dump their shares on retail, buy Bitcoin, lock it up, rinse and repeat, they can get reliable returns. And so essentially this article goes through and proves that there is a correlation here, not just once, not just twice, but over and over and over again between when these shares unlock and price action increase that will essentially draw people to relock in more Bitcoin into Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. So essentially the cycle repeats itself. So what you have here are these tranches of new money in that show surges of new funds being locked up in Grayscale. You can see the change here, and then you see periods of stagnation oftentimes where very little money comes in. But you see here a big surge on this date, a big surge on this date. And if we look when these funds are unlocked, what do we see is a huge surge of price action in the period during this unlock, right as these funds are unlocking. And so right as these funds are unlocking, what we see is a big surge, which creates a premium in the price of GBTC. As price increases, we see a GBTC premium increase as well, typically. So what we see is that this happened not just once and twice, but here this time, we see it happen 5 and 6, huge inflows here with tranche 6, boom, boom. And so what we see here is as these tranches get unlocked, we're seeing huge amounts of price action that essentially allow for Grayscale Bitcoin Trust to continue to incentivize more institutional investment and preserve their 30% bonus on those shares of GBTC just by essentially keeping the wagon wheel spinning. Essentially what this means for you and for me is that we're looking at no major unlocking periods happening between December 29th and February 3rd, 2021. Well, then why, starting on December 29th, did we see this incredible explosion of price? Well, the reality is that the bottom of this head and shoulders, or really the base of it, started right after December 29th. So that might mean that what we're looking at here is a genuine retail FOMO. Like this run that we're seeing that's above 30,000 is potentially pure retail. And while there are a ton of institutions obviously buying and accumulating, this might mean that the area under 30,000 is far more supported by institutional buys, where over 30,000 we had a bit more FOMO. February 3rd is several weeks from now, which would mean that we might have some angling price action with no support from the big behemoth that is Grayscale, and what happens to be the everlasting coincidence that price pumps after their unlocked days to essentially reel back in more money at a premium and keep those institutional investors assured that their investments into Grayscale is essentially better than just holding spot Bitcoin. I've again been right to kind of withhold my coin picks for now because essentially I'm not worried ever about Bitcoin and Ethereum. Those will go up, but buying an altcoin right before a big collapse of Bitcoin price can potentially be bad. Whereas if you wait for it to collapse and then get the altcoin, you can sometimes get some really big altcoin seasons right while Bitcoin's kind of taking a breather. That might be a perfect opportunity for this in late January for essentially altcoins to start stealing the show. So to summarize, we could go up and fill this CME gap and all is well, and we'd probably push on to newer and higher highs. We could also be fulfilling this head and shoulders, and if we do fulfill this head and shoulders, that would mean that we'll probably break down here into the mid 20,000s. At that point, that would probably be a phenomenal opportunity to get lower priced Bitcoin, or what I'm going to be focusing on, which is some juicy entries into altcoins, which will probably, if Bitcoin ends up chilling out in that range, be an absolutely fantastic and fruitful time for altcoins. And even through the volatility, we saw really awesome altcoins like Ramp having an absolute monstrous pump. I mean, Ramp's almost near all-time highs. Again, need to mention that these guys are a sponsor of my channel, but they're doing some really epic stuff. And their pump today makes a lot of sense because they just integrated with Icon and IOTEX, which essentially Ramp, what it does is it takes liquidity and you lock it by staking it on these other blockchains, and you can unleash it in Ethereum. Everyone wants their money in Ethereum where they can enter into DeFi and use it to get yield and use it to trade on Uniswap and use it for a lot of things. Whereas these layer one protocols, they tend to be a little bit of what they call ghost chains or zombie chains. There tends to be a lack of activity and a lack of utility for these tokens. So by freezing them on Icon or IOTEX, that's two more networks that you're going to be able to take your liquidity over through Ramp's protocol. This is really awesome progress for Ramp, and it's no surprise that the market is responding again and treating it as what it is, which is an increase in the value of Ramp's network, an increase in Ramp's utility. This is very good, and you're seeing the 46% pump there. We also got Parsec with an amazingly big pump here. It actually flew all the way up to 71 cents, which isn't quite the all-time high. The all-time high is 77 here. It's funny, Parsec and Ramp, and you guys can see now that it's not just any token that can get a sponsorship on my channel. I only work with the absolute cream of the crop and the best. And Ramp and Parsec are both fantastic altcoins that probably have a lot more legs in them. Again, if the market structure doesn't hold, these are coins that I would definitely be getting more and more of. Obviously, I have a lot of Parsec and a lot of Ramp already, but if you guys are not already into these coins, if the market structure doesn't hold, that would be a great opportunity probably to rewind the clock a little bit and get a little bit cheaper PRQ and Ramp, as both of these coins have a lot of fundamental news still coming. And I believe that they're going to have some fantastic 2021s. So what does it all mean for you? Well, the reality is that right now, Bitcoin is flashing a very dangerous signal with the head and shoulders. And it very well might be the case based on analysis that Grayscale has stopped fulfilling some institutional demand, and that the last few days and weeks have really been a big retail phenomenon, meaning that the price support might not quite be there in this high $30,000 range, and we might actually be going down to test lower. Again, we could just fill the gap higher and move onward and upward. The charts have not made a final decision yet. However, it does appear that Head and Shoulders is filling out, and that would not be bullish for the short short term. In fact, I believe that we were reaching a euphoria phase way too fast, and that if you do reach a euphoria phase, where you go down to the corner and your barber's telling you about altcoins, and you get in an Uber and your Uber's telling you about altcoins, and then everyone's telling you that they're just getting so rich off Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's the way it was at the end of 2017, early 18, before the monstrous crash. Having an emotional reset, remember, all markets are just humans trading against each other. So having the psychological reset is really important to extend the life cycle of the bull run. And I felt like we were getting really fast to that euphoria phase. And that means to me that if we're able to take a strong reset here and build strength again, that would extend the life cycle of this bull run, potentially past 2021 into 2022, maybe even longer, if we don't go straight up like a rocket without any pause. The longer the bull run, in my opinion, the higher the price targets we will hit, the more opportunities you'll have to accumulate the really good altcoins, the really good majors, and the more chance you'll have, I personally believe, to turn this cryptocurrency bull run into a life-changing financial event. Again, there's always risk in these markets, and that's why there's such asymmetric reward. But I believe that even if we do break down on this market head and shoulders structure, that would present some huge opportunities for altcoins. And at that point, I'd be much more willing to share with you these juicy, new, exciting altcoins, and ones that I see performing tremendously well over the coming weeks and months. If we could just get some stability or boringness in Bitcoin, I believe it's going to be absolutely magical for these altcoins. But it is true that a huge lurch down in Bitcoin might temporarily drain them. So you got to be a little careful. Regardless, I hope this was educational for you, understanding how GBTC works, the wild coincidences of during their unlock periods, there being massive price action on Bitcoin. And yes, they do have a lot of money and they have been OGs in the space. They do have plenty of tools to potentially manipulate price upward. With that said, if you guys learned something, if you guys enjoyed this episode, if you guys enjoyed hearing about yet another big element of how this Bitcoin and cryptocurrency market functions and ticks, then go ahead, give me a thumbs up. And remember that each and every comment on this video is entered to win your very own hardware wallet. If you guys are excited to hear about these juicy altcoin picks I have coming, and yes, I know I keep teasing them, but timing, like I said, isn't everything in crypto. It's the only thing. So if I release a list on you, let's just say I would have released it while Bitcoin was at 42K, I probably wouldn't have done you any big favors there. Obviously, we did talk about Ramp and Parsec and Alliance Block and a lot of other ones that are up majorly over the last few weeks. But the reality is there's a lot more meat on the bone and a lot more opportunities coming to the frame that you need to be aware of, and I'm going to be covering for you. So if you guys are excited for those, all you have to do is subscribe and put that bell notification on, and you'll be made aware whenever I put out new content. With that said, thank you so much for watching. My name's Elio Trades, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.